Ever pondered why a wound, if neglected, festers and spreads, causing greater harm than the original injury? This analogy mirrors how trauma affects the human psyche, triggering a series of events that can leave a person wrestling with its impact for years or even a lifetime. Trauma, in its simplest form, is a deep psychological wound that persists long after the initial event has passed. It's akin to a phantom lurking in the mind's corridors, resurfacing repeatedly in the form of flashbacks, nightmares, or emotional upheaval. Each recurrence is a link in this chain reaction, a painful reminder of the incident that initiated it all. It could even be said that each flashback is additional damage caused by the person who inflicted the trauma. In a way, it's like a virus that can infect others, truly highlighting the chain reaction effect. It begins with a cause, which we can call the incident. Then there's an effect, which we can call the trauma, and then there's a chain reaction, which can take various forms. There are instances when society, due to its lack of understanding, may blame the victim for their reactions to trauma. Consider a mother grieving over her daughter who fell prey to a horrifying crime. If she seeks justice, even if it involves confronting the criminal, she might face legal consequences. But is it fair to blame her for her actions when they originate from her deep-seated trauma? Look at it this way. Isn't the person who caused the trauma responsible for the chain reaction that ensues? Shouldn't this be considered a form of instigation? The person whom caused the trauma is accountable for the consequent actions of the traumatized person and should also be considered as the instigator for all consequences. It doesn't matter how these actions manifest, whether it is because someone punched a stranger out of reflex for standing too close due to being in a constant fight or flight mode. This is where the example of trauma being somewhat of a virus becomes visible. Doesn't it make sense that wanting to harm the person who caused the trauma is a logical response, even if the law forbids it? If this was going to happen, and it does happen in society, then it is my perspective that the harm suffered by the person whom caused trauma should be considered as self-inflicted. And if the person whom suffered trauma was going to be punished for any of these actions, wouldn't that only add to their trauma? Perhaps it is time to admit that people whom fail to see this nuance and decide to punish the victim should perhaps be considered as children playing doctor in a real hospital. Because there are plenty of cases in which such victims receive punishment. But trauma isn't a universal experience. Each person's reaction can vary significantly. Some may internalize their pain, intentionally or unintentionally, causing harm to themselves or others. These actions are not isolated incidents. They're part of a broader narrative that started with an act of trauma by another. In conclusion, understanding trauma requires us to recognize its intricate nature and individual variations. The actions of those battling trauma are not isolated incidents, but part of a broader narrative initiated by the original traumatic event. Only by acknowledging this can we extend genuine empathy and support to those dealing with the enduring aftermath of trauma. It is time that people learn to see the bigger picture.